Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is the kickoff of Southern Jewish Voices for the 2026-2027 season. And we're kicking off with a great interview that we'll get to in just a moment. A few thank yous. Thank you to the Birmingham Jewish Federation and Foundation for providing part of the funding to keep this program going. We're in our 5th season now, and it's been great from the start. Southern Jewish Voices is an endeavor to record the varied stories of Jewish people and their lives in the South. And then everything is recorded and posted to our YouTube for posterity. And you're welcome to take a look if you've ever missed one of our Southern Jewish Voices, a look back at who we've interviewed. So we're kicking off this season with Jake Reiss. Margaret Norman from the JCRC is going to interview him. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And just want to highlight, she said this already, but it's hard to believe that we're starting our 5th season of this program. And I can't imagine a better guest to be kicking off with. I had the pleasure of visiting with Jake at Alabama Booksmith a few weeks ago. And he has such an interesting story and interesting business, and I think y'all will really enjoy hearing all about it. So we're going to jump in. The biggest challenge of this program is always that we have about 45 minutes, and we have a lot to get to. But I want to start where we always do, which is with family and your early life. And I was particularly struck when we spoke about the impact that your family history and your grandparents in particular had on you. So I thought we would just talk through a few of those influences to get started. First with both of your grandfathers. And I'm going to give a little context here. So your paternal grandfather, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Jacob Reiss Sr., who you're named for, emigrated from Budapest to Mobile in the late 1800s, opened a clothing store, became very civically involved in Mobile, including in Mardi Gras celebrations. Let's start a little bit with his story.
You covered it. I'm through. My 2 grandfathers were as opposite as I think any 2 men could be. My paternal grandfather, as Margaret said, came to Mobile in the late 1880s. He was connected. He got a job at Hamill's, which at that time was the largest department store in Alabama. He was a manager. He was well educated. He was tall, distinguished, aristocratic. And after a short period of time, actually in 1899, opened his own business that eventually became Reiss Mercantile, and then the Great Reiss Thoroughfare, because it had entrances on 3 streets. He was as we used to say, a big mocker. He was president of the Chamber of Commerce, and in that position he hosted and had lunch with President Woodrow Wilson. He headed the Mardi Gras operation. He had 7 children. His 4 daughters all made their debuts. And my father was the youngest of his 7 children and was given his name, Jake Reiss Jr. And then came my maternal grandfather. And as a 6-year-old, his mother died in childbirth, giving birth to his sister. His father remarried, and my grandfather, as a small child, and his stepmother did not get along. And at the ripe old age of 12, he walked to the next town and became a bartender. And did a good job, I understand. He was not educated. And later on, I was going to mention, when he came to this country, he never learned to read and write. But after a few years as a bartender, he and a couple of his friends walked from Romania to Liverpool, took a boat to Canada, and had a connection in New York, went down to New York, and tried his hand the tailoring business of all things, and he didn't like it. So he was helped to buy a push cart. And the short story is he pushed the cart from New York to Mobile, Alabama, stopping along the way and returning to New York. Upon arriving in Mobile in the early 1900s, he married a young girl whose family immigrated from Poland, and took the proceeds of his pushcart business and opened, I don't know if everybody knows what an Army-Navy store is, but that's what he opened. Again, as my paternal grandfather was, as I earlier described, my maternal grandfather was a short, round, absolutely, totally happy man, bright blue eyes, and always smiling and joking. He raised 4 of his 9 children above the store, and then bought a home not too far away, a mile and a half away, and the rest of the kids came along. It just so happened his backyard backed up to the Reiss backyard, and the rest is history.
And tell me, it seemed like your maternal grandfather, Isidore, was particularly a big influence on you growing up. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
He was indeed. My paternal grandfather passed away 12 years before I was born. And I guess I can't do air quotes. I worked at age 6, as so many folks did, and there were no child labor laws back then that prevented it. I didn't do much work. But I spent the summer with him, and he had an incredible sense of humor. If I may take a moment, this is corny, but it has stuck with me for 85 years. At this Army-Navy store, most of his customers were merchant seamen. We were a block and a half from the Mobile River where the ships docked. And one day, as I was sitting there and I took it in, and again, I don't remember yesterday very well, but 85 years ago, the customer that came in wanted a trunk, a steamer trunk. And again, I have a vivid memory. He had a broom handle with 2 nails on it that he reached up several feet above to get the shelf and bring it down and show the customer the trunk. And word for word, the customer said, "How much is it?" And my grandfather said, $3.95. And the customer said, Rips has it for $2.95. And my grandfather said, "Why didn't you buy it from Rips?" And the customer said, "They're out of them." And my grandfather, and I love it, said, "When we're out of them, they're $1.95. And that silly little joke, I think, gives you an idea of just who that man was.
I love that. And I also wanted to ask if there was anything you wanted to share about your grandmothers. And in the replies that you sent back to me too, you mentioned that your maternal grandmother was always cooking. So I was curious if that was something that she enjoyed cooking, or other details you wanted to share about them.
Another of my memories is she made the best latkes in the world. But she did. She had 9 children. 7 of them remained in Mobile. And it just so happens that their home was on the parade route for the Mardi Gras parade. So all the family went down there, and she was constantly cooking, and she would grate the potatoes. We didn't have the modern conveniences, and it seemed that she loved it. She was happiest when she was cooking.
Anything else you want to share about parents, siblings, etc. before we keep moving?
Well, if there are any specifics, just My mother, as I mentioned, was a Prince. They moved next door. I mentioned that earlier. My mother, like her mother and father, never learned to drive. My father, at age 36, volunteered to serve in World War II, went in the Navy. He was exempt. At that time, he had 2 children and so would not have been drafted. And I have a memory of visiting him. He was wounded and recouped in Norman, Oklahoma, a naval hospital. And my mother and I, in July, went on the train from Mobile to Oklahoma. And again, one of my few memories, I remember how hot it was.
Pre-air conditioning, right?
Pre-air conditioning.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about growing up in Mobile. Tell me a bit about the Mobile of your childhood, and I also want to learn, specifically what it was like to be Jewish in Mobile as a young person. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you weren't particularly religious. Your family wasn't very religiously involved, but you were aware of being Jewish. So maybe elaborate on that.
To elaborate a little bit, I mentioned that the 7 members of the Prince family, the 7 children, remained in Mobile, and 3 of them were males, so they got excused from cooking. But the 4 daughters hosted the family for celebrations. 2 of the daughters hosted for the Jewish holidays, 1 for Thanksgiving, and as you might guess, my family hosted for Christmas. Neither parent was very religious. In fact, my grandparents, the Princes, even though he was the, as you might say, point guard for Jewish refugees who would come to Mobile, he would help them out, help them find whatever they needed. They were not particularly religious. And I went to a military school where I was not only the only Jew in my class, there was only 1 other in the whole school. So I really didn't have much of a Jewish upbringing or influence. I did go to Sunday school and I was confirmed. I was not bar mitzvah.
Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism growing up in Mobile?
I really did not. In fact, there was, of course, anti-Semitism. I was very fortunate in that it sounds so much of what happened 70, 80 years ago was going to seem strange to a modern audience, but there were high school fraternities, and I didn't feel anti-Semitism, but Jews were not allowed to join. So I got the advantage of not having to go to the meetings or pay dues, so I went to the parties. and so I was going to try to avoid this, but just to mention, since my grandfather and father were so involved in Mardi Gras, you guys are looking at royalty. I was the king of the Mardi Gras, but juvenile. I didn't throw moon pies, but part of the celebration during the parade on Saturday, the float would stop at the Athelstan Club, where I would honor my queen. Again, I'm 13 years old. The Athelstan Club did not allow Jews to join, but they allowed me to wave my scepter. So there was definitely anti-Semitism in Mobile, and I have also a memory. I assume many of you have stayed at the Grand Hotel. It was, and the word they used in those days was restricted. And we were not allowed to stay at the Grand Hotel. So those are my experiences. I never got in a fight or had rocks thrown at me or called the names that I'm sure many folks in that era were. I was, I guess, shielded.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing those. I'm going to keep moving us forward a little bit because we have so much to cover in your career. But first, let's connect some dots. So you leave Mobile for college, doesn't work for you, you come back. Anything you want to share about that period of time? And in particular, I'm interested in getting into the family business.
Well, you'd asked in our pre-talks, and I'm looking at, I don't see anybody old enough to remember a lot of the things I'm mentioning, but I assume there were others like me. There was never any doubt that from the time I was this high, of course, I always worked summers at my daddy's store, and so when I got out of college, I was going to work in the family business, period. That was just it. And I'm of the opinion, and it was not strict, that if your daddy was a doctor or a lawyer, you'd be a doctor or a lawyer. If your daddy drove a streetcar, you'd drive a streetcar. It was not hard and fast, but that was the mindset somewhat in the 1930s and 40s.
And this is just a random question I'm curious about, but I didn't ask you this before. Were there many other Jewish merchants in Mobile?
There were indeed, yes. Many of the leading merchants in downtown Mobile were Jewish, mostly clothing. And then most of the stores, I've mentioned my grandfather's Army Navy store, most of the stores on Lower Government Street, where now there's the Bankhead Tunnel, near where the Seaman came in, most of those were owned by Jewish merchants.
Interesting. And so you come back, you work in your dad's store, but you do go on to open your own business. So tell us a little bit about your arc getting to the place where you open your own store, and then also all the way to becoming, in quotes, tailored to the pros.
Yeah, after good gracious, 1955 was when I learned everything I could at the University of Alabama and went to work in my father's store. And 8 years later, in 1963, I opened my own business. It was called J. Reiss Gentleman's Attire. And we were catty corner across from the Battle House, and a couple of years later, the Detroit Lions played an exhibition football game, and one of the players meandered to our store. And when I opened the store, we were a men's ready-to-wear, and we had a little bitty box, about 12 inches, about the size of a super sub sandwich, where we had probably 100, 200 samples of cloth. And I loved taking those samples of cloth and showing it to customers, because a custom-made suit sold for a lot more at that time than the regular suits I carried, and there was no inventory. If the customer was 6'6" or 4'6", weighed 100 pounds or 400 pounds, we could fit him out of that little box. And eventually I became so enamored with it that we got rid of all the inventory and operated out of the box, but we enlarged on that a good bit. And this young man, who was indeed 6'5" and 300 odd pounds, came in. We made him a suit. He liked it, and we liked him. His name was Skunk Sanders, and if anybody saw the George Plimpton movie, he was one of the stars, offensive lineman. And we had a friendship and decided we would have a business relationship. And we changed the name of the business to Tailor to the Pros. And we went all over the country making clothes for National Football League players. Went to spent a lot of time in Detroit, Buffalo. They closed for Jack Kemp, who went on to more fame after football. Atlanta, Cleveland, and it was great fun for a guy in his 20s. I was agog at having inside info. It didn't work out financially in that these guys could get great deals from the local tailors who would give them clothes to wear their suits and say, I got this at Joe's or wherever. But for a few years, it was great fun, and we kept the name Tailored to the Pros.
What did you most enjoy about that time?
I guess being one of the guys. I was a terrible high school football player, never played, mostly sat on the bench, and to be on a first name basis and in the locker room and travel with these guys. I happened to be in Detroit the night it burned down. I was at if anybody's heard, the Lindale AC, the Lindale Athletic Club, and 4 members of the Detroit Lions owned that business. And while every building on the block and in the downtown area burned, theirs wasn't touched because they stood outside with shotguns and protected it.
Wow. And this was after the Martin Luther King assassination?
That was in response to that, yes.
And I know we don't want to spend too much time on this, but is there anything you want to add about the civil rights period in Mobile, because you were there during that time?
Well, contrary to my new home, Mobile, Alabama had 0 racial issues. And that was because, it's too bad it didn't happen here, the downtown merchants and the black pastors would get together. We would sneak around after dark and go up to the Chamber of Commerce building, and we would actually sit at a long table. It was a negotiation. The white merchants here and the black pastors here. And it's, again, this is so incredible when we think about that it really happened, that there were fountains. They were not allowed to drink out of the fountain or use the restroom. Or at Easter and Christmas, our biggest sales were to African Americans, and they were not allowed to try on clothes. So the negotiations, again, which I remember, we had 4 uniformed maids, and we agreed that they would not wear their uniforms, but would wear street clothes and wait on black customers. And that sort of thing of give and take, again, it seems so incredible. It seems like another world, but because of that, we had 0 problems compared to what we had in Birmingham.
And you mean the sort of like turmoil that...
Yeah. It was, the whole thing is difficult for me to put my mind around, but we had no turmoil.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm kind of lost in my timeline here, but I know at some point during this period you also got married and started a family.
I was a child bride. I was age 20, and my wife was 19. That's why Jake is 84.
Is that your son in the audience?
That is my son. This is frequently embarrassing when I'm in a group of Jewish folks. He's Jake Reiss the Fourth.
And tell us why that's embarrassing for anyone who doesn't know.
For anybody who doesn't know, you're not supposed to do that. Not after a living person. We can somewhat excuse my grandfather because my father was his youngest, but my father and I have no excuse.
And part of the reason I asked that question is I'm curious, what Jewish traditions that were important to you when you had your own family, or what type of Jewish involvement you had with your kids, etc.
I was afraid you were going to ask. Not very much. In conversation with my son, asked him for his help, and this isn't self-deprecating. It is what it is. I said, Morgan wants to know, what did I do to influence you? And his response, which I'll repeat and maybe embarrass him, was, well, what you did is to lead us along in the Jewish faith. You drove us to Sunday school, you picked us up and took us to lunch. And that's pretty much it.
But you know what? That's not nothing, so I like that answer. Okay, I'm going to keep kind of moving us back into career because I want to get to the opening of the bookstore. So by 1982, you were living in Birmingham and you opened a store here with your son, this son?
Well, he came in 82. We actually came up in 1971.
Okay, so you were in.
It all changed when
Got
he
it.
came in 82.
Yeah, and I'll give you a moment to say too, it seems like he really transformed the business in a big way.
That's embarrassing, but it's true. and since you're along that line and we can't get away from it, since I left going to book business, he has embarrassed me even more because he's doing like 10 times what we have done. Stop it.
So we'll stop that line, but it's around that time that you also visit your other son in San Francisco where he's working at a used bookstore. So I'd love for you to tell us about where you first get an interest in buying and selling books.
Well, that was easy. My smart son, the Phi Beta Kappa, who graduated in Rome, Italy with a major in Latin, who wanted to be a writer, and upon graduation from college, got a job as a writer, writing operational manuals for nuclear submarines for General Dynamics. He ended up working for minimum wage at a used bookstore in San Francisco. And Jake and I went out to visit him. I'd never been in a used anything store, but he was buying books for pennies and selling them for dollars. And I thought, bingo. Here's a way to make millions and meet girls. And that was our motivation to get in the book business. I was not a reader. As an aside, tell one more joke. When Frank, my youngest son, opened his own store, he visited in Birmingham, and I had a really nice collection of about 100 books, I thought. And I offered to him for free for his used bookstore, and he took 3 of them. The quality might not have been up to par for him.
Interesting. So how do you go from being, you have this idea, you're not a reader, as you said, you're kind of watching your son go through this process. How do you get to actually opening a bookstore from there?
Well, I had a friend who was a reader and knew about it, and I asked her to run it, and I'd put up the money, and she would do all the other stuff. And unfortunately, sadly, she was killed in a house fire.
Mm.
But I still had my motor running, and one of Jake's friends helped me find a location on the ground floor of the Highland Towers apartment building across from Bottega. And so for about a year, we went to garage sales and estate sales and collected enough books, first to fill my closet, then to fill my spare bedroom. And then we opened the store. And again, I still know nothing. And I may still not know much, but fortunately we had a lot of folks to help. We put a sign in the window, no ad, there was no internet. And we had 30 folks apply. One of them we anointed a manager, and they took it from there. I would leave the tailoring shop and come by on occasion and hang out. And one by one, I would pick up a book and read it. And again, the rest is history.
And so you're on Highland Avenue, and this is where Freddy's is today, right? You said?
Exactly, yeah.
Just so people can kind of place that.
And but this my son took me to Freddy's on my birthday. It was just wonderful. I recommend Freddy's.
And now you can think of the original location while you're there. But I do want to ask, so by the time you moved locations in 2012, you've shifted your model to what it is today, which is selling only signed books.
Well,
how do you first get into that?
Timeline's a little off.
Okay.
In 20, good gracious, it can't be. In 1999, if that's possible, we lost our lease and we bought a dilapidated old building in Homewood. Had it fixed up a little bit, and when time came to move, we had 40 volunteers who took the books from Highland Avenue to Homewood. And some of you may know Craig Legg, a local historian, who was our first employee and actually lined the books up because they have to be alphabetical. And so when we opened in 1999, the Homewood store, we had new and used books,
okay,
hardbacks and paperbacks. We, a few years later, got rid of the used books and just had new books. And we noticed that folks seemed to be more impressed with the signed books, so we eventually, in 2013, got rid of all the books that weren't signed and moved from there.
And how did you first get the idea of selling signed books? Like, where does that kind of start for you?
Tom luck is what I usually say, but the manager of our store had a friend, Don Keith, who has since written 40 books, and he asked if he could have a book signing. He wrote his first book, and that was our first book signing, our first signed books, and it was fun, and folks seemed to be impressed that the book had the author's signature. So it wasn't very important, but it was semi-important.
Mm-hmm.
And as we moved to Homewood, it became more important and more fun, and we had more celebrity authors and celebrity folks come in, and then we're able to obtain signed copies even when the authors didn't come, through the publishing houses or shipping the books to the authors. So it became easier and more fun.
Yeah, and that seems like a key component for you.
It's one of the few fun things I can do.
And this is kind of just one other small thing, but for those who haven't been to Alabama Booksmith, I also noticed that you have the books placed differently. They're all facing outwards. How long have you been doing that, or is that something you always did?
Well, it's part of our smoke and mirrors. Things are great, and there are no complaints. We have a huge operation. Most of our business is online, and most of our books are shipped around the world. But we are open 6 days a week in case anybody comes in. But we had all that space, and number one, it takes up more space when that sucker is flattened face out instead of spine out. But actually, still truthfully, it's so great to, whoever that was first said, you can't judge a book by its cover, didn't know what they were talking about. If you walk in a bookstore and see all those covers, you can pretty much tell the beach read or the serious history or the fantasy, and it's fun. I like the way it looks, and many of the media articles we have been fortunate enough to be featured in. First thing they talk about is the books face out.
Yeah, it seems like you have a real mind for doing those little things that kind of distinguish your business too, or make you different in some way. Do you think that that's been an important part of your business model?
I think so. We are as far as we can tell, we're the only
bookstore on the planet that sells nothing but hardback, new, used books, and their regular price, no extra charge. Send it to them.
We'll have a few more questions about the bookstore, and then we'll kind of move into a last section here. You know, one question I have is that you made this shift in your 50s. So what was it like, you know, starting sort of this whole other career that, you know, at that age, and curious like what you brought from the retail business to your bookstore too.
Something I hadn't thought about, what came from the retail, from the custom tailoring.
Oh, sorry, tailoring is what I
It
meant.
was, which is so different in our business to compare with, I won't say our competitors, we don't think of all the bookstores as competitors. There's some really good bookstores in Birmingham, and certainly many around the country and in this part of the country. But we operate our joint maybe as close as we can, like the custom tailoring business, although it's quite a different product, quite a different process. But all our customers are our regular customers on a first name basis, and we don't share with the FBI, but we have a file on everybody's book, and we if it's a birthday, anniversary, we know what our customers have a taste for. And I don't know that other bookstores have the time or the I don't want to be negative about this. It's just a whole different operation. They get lots and lots of people in the store. We don't get lots and lots of people in the store. We get lots and lots of orders online, and we get nice folks in the store.
Like Joyce, who I know is one of your regulars sitting right there. I keep thinking of her as you're talking. And then I just kind of want to hit on this one more time, sort of why Alabama Booksmith works. And I want to read, you said to me in your response to that question via email, there are billions of people occupying this planet, and we're happy to have a shot at a small group of a few billion, which I feel like sort of speaks to what you're saying, that you're more focused on those few who really care about what you're doing.
Again, I hate to admit to this full house that those of you who are readers, really readers, who read all the time, who love books, who have stacks of books, if a friend shares with you, oh, Margaret, you're going to love this. This is your kind of book. The chances are, I'll put you on the hot seat. The chances are that you would say, oh, well, thanks for thinking of me. Can I read your copy? Or if you have a relationship with a local bookstore, you would go get it, or go to your local library, or heaven forbid, order it from Amazon. The chances of you saying, oh, thanks so much for telling me, do you know where I can find a hardback first printing that's signed? Not very likely. Again, it's not their regular price, so if you happen to be looking for the new hot seller and we have it and it happens to be signed, you're not going to say, I don't want it, it's signed. Or a good portion of our books are gifts. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool when you give someone a book signed by their favorite author or celebrity. How did you get this signed? Oh, we went to school together. Yeah. But this is the percentage that we really appeal to of folks that are getting in their car and drive to a bookstore to get a book and pass this bookstore to go to that bookstore to get a signed copy. So we have a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of readers that we appeal to, but a few in Birmingham and a few in Indiana and one or two in Thailand. So we've got the whole world to deal with.
That's really interesting. And would you consider yourself a reader today?
I'm a reader today, and Anybody want? Well, that's one of the few things I'll challenge you to. I read a lot of books.
How many books a year do you read?
A lot. An embarrassing number.
Okay,
We read almost every book in the store. We don't read if we're putting a book in the store, in all due respect, let's say Joe Namath or some famous movie star athlete, probably not going to read that because probably the folks who are buying it are not going to read it. They just want the signature. But most of the books we read before we put them on the shelf.
So many books a year.
Many books a year.
And I also wanted to just plug you. There was a wonderful New Yorker article published earlier this year, and definitely encourage everyone to check that out for more of your story. But they called you maybe the strangest bookstore in America. Do you agree with that description?
That's not nice. But I plead guilty. I think we do have the strangest bookstore, not just in America. There was to brag a little bit more, there was a publication in the UK a few years back called the Bookshop Book, and they listed unusual bookstores around the world on 6 continents, and they had 16 in North America, and we were one of them. And I think we're guilty. We are a strange joint.
And I hope that if anyone has not been, you go check it out after today. I have just a few more questions and then we'll come to a close. This is out of the bookstore for a moment, but do you want to mention too that, you have some community involvements, want to give you a chance to talk about any of those. You helped start Big Brothers, Big Sisters here in Birmingham, and you're involved in the English department at UAB. What has been the importance of those involvements to you?
Well, first of all, that was a lifetime ago. None of that is lately, but it was fun. We were involved with the English department both at UAB and Birmingham Southern. Birmingham Southern had a conference that brings in writers, and UAB regularly brought in speakers, and it was, again, it was fun. And Big Brothers was also fun, and to this date, I haven't checked lately. Again, it's been 40 years or more. But my son and I think, are the only 2 Big Brothers father-son combo. But when it first started, we didn't have a staff, and so the founders sort of took the job of matching up the kids with the Big Brothers. And it was an incredibly warm, fuzzy feeling at that time, that long ago. I was a divorced father and didn't get to spend a lot of time. My kids would spend the summer with me and visit occasionally, and I would go there. But it was not really a substitute dad, but it was a good, warm, fuzzy feeling.
That's really neat. And I also wanted to give you a chance to shout out your son's bookstore in Atlanta, Acapella Books, which you said is doing really well. Anything you want to add about that?
Well, just like my son Jake, my son Frank embarrasses me. He's started off with a little bitty place, not nearly as big as his room, but not as big as from here to there. And he now has one of the great bookstores in the country. He does huge, ridiculous amounts of volume, both in-store and events. He's hosted Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bernie, you name it, and other people who are not politicians, but major authors. If they tour, and they would most likely go to Atlanta, and if they go to Atlanta, they would go to Acapella.
So that puts another bookstore on our list to all visit.
His is a real bookstore.
And I have a few closing questions about the bookstore, but before I get to that, I shifted this question a little based on how you responded to me earlier. But we've talked a little bit about Jewish identity, and you told me that you really feel your Jewish identity as a birthright more than anything. So what does birthright mean to you? What does that mean to you?
That's I said that to you when you first started the conversation, and there was something going on nationally. Some of you may have seen or heard of about birthrights, what was or wasn't citizenship, and I think I wanted to express, first of all, my outrage at that, but I was born Jewish, and I will die Jewish, not anytime soon, hopefully. But neither of my parents were religious or attended services, and neither of my grandparents, who were still alive when I came along, and going to a private military school without any Jewish friends, other than Sunday school. Growing up, I wasn't exposed like so many of you were. So I didn't have motivation, and I wasn't so inclined.
Well, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to ask you just a few kind of quick, rapid questions about the bookstore. One that I'm just going to add based on what you said earlier is, when I asked you about opening the bookstore, you said your motivation was really to make millions and meet girls. So curious if that ever came around.
It's early to say. All the reports aren't in yet. Working on both.
We'll check back on that one. And then just some fun facts. Which former president have you had the pleasure of having lunch with through the bookstore?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I like to brag. One of the celebrities was President Jimmy Carter, which was the ultimate. If I were to write the history of the bookstore today, hosting Jimmy Carter, and more importantly than the book signing, we had 1,500 people in line. More importantly than that was we brought lunch from Franklin Biggs, who had opened Homeward Gourmet. And after we gave out food to the Secret Service, the FBI, Alabama Highway Patrol, Homeward Police, Birmingham Police, the publisher's staff, President Carter and I had a one-on-one, just the two of us lunch. And it just, I do get chills thinking about it. And he said, in the wonderful personal conversation, he said, "This is the best chicken salad I ever had." And Franklin Biggs put that quote on his store the whole time we had it. But thank you for asking. That was wonderful. Worth all the almost 40 years in this business.
Very neat. And are there any books in particular on your shelves right now that you think we should come check out?
Well, Joyce is shaking her head. Joyce, give a report.
What should we come check out, Joyce?
17 years ago, we hosted a book signing for an unknown writer who had just been turned down by 60 publishers. She had graduated the University of Alabama. She looked about 11 or 12 years old, and she brought her best friend from Montgomery with her. I expected a zero turnout, but we had promised to host her. I met her and her editor. We had a great crowd, and the book was, I think the name of it was The Help, and it turned out to be pretty good. And the best friend she brought with her turned out to be pretty good. Her name was Octavia Spencer, and there was at that time, of course, there was no thought of a movie or Octavia winning the Academy Award. And since that time, she says she's been working hard, and she came back to visit a few weeks ago, and it only took her 17 years to write The Calamity Club.
That's awesome.
And I don't know if any of you have read it, but I would suggest it's, now look out, it's a big fat book. It's about this big, almost 700 pages.
Oh, wow.
But it's if you're looking for a book for the rest of the summer, check out the Calamity Club.
Well, I think that's a pretty good plug for us to end on. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We can give a round of applause to Ms. Berry.
Thank you.